Well, first of all, a part of my market research that I started in the beginning of 1984, I identified 50 bars and restaurants in the Twin Cities area where I would set up appointments to interview and talk with either general managers or owners of that establishment. And those 50 establishments were also my initial target list of potential accounts. So in most cases, I had met these folks before. So it was like popping up like a bad penny, because so many people laughed at me like, "Are you really gonna do this? I think you're crazy." So the fact that I came back again, I think, shocked them. And then I would show up with EPA in champagne bottles that we would rack off from our bright beer tanks and then cap those bottles and then take those out so I had samples. You know, previously when I interviewed them, they would say, "Well, what's the beer going to taste like?" You know, I could give them a flavor profile, but I never gave them a taste until the beer was finished. Now, going back to 1986, when we were still under construction, even when we had beer that was ready for market, there wasn't a beer wholesaler in the Twin Cities that would even have a conversation with me. They wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole because we were such deviants. We were off the grid. We were off the chart. So essentially, we had to self-distribute out of necessity and survival. I mean, we had enough beer in the tanks and enough beer that was in kegs so that we were prepared to deliver. That was critical. We were still in that gray area of where people would say, "Yeah, I like this beer, it's really interesting. I think I'll give it a go." Well, then you follow up with that and say, "Well, what day would you like your delivery?" That's when the hemming and hawing came about, right? And they say, "Well, let me think. I've got this beer on draft. I've got this much left. So why don't you call me back in 4 days?" People within that group of 50 potential accounts, I would say about half of them looked at me and says, "Oh, so you're not working with distributor XYZ? I'm sorry, that's the only distributor I work with. And how are you going to deliver me beer?" So, you know, even though we had 10 commitments that first week, I think we were delivering to probably 5 spots in that first week. Some of the other folks started to come around, and a handful of them never did. So it was still a process of learning, even though I had done some pretty deep diligence in terms of how the 3-tier is structured and everything else. And you know, our very first account was Johnny's Bar, and that happened to be across the street, so we brought it over on a 2-wheeler. So it was breaking new ground in so many ways.